Imagine waking up one day to find that most people around you no longer question anything. The world has become so loud, so fast, and so saturated with information that the human mind, once a powerful tool for inquiry, discernment, and growth, has dulled into passive acceptance. Consider what happens to a society where critical thinking disappears, where the ability to reason, challenge, and reflect is replaced by instant reactions, surface-level opinions, and collective echo chambers. In this video, we will uncover the unsettling truth behind the decline of critical thinking and the dangerous rise of what some philosophers call collective stupidity, a phenomenon in which large groups of people embrace shallow thinking and blindly accept prevailing narratives. Many people surrender their intellectual independence without even realizing it. By the end of this journey, we will confront a powerful and urgent truth, one that could determine whether we reclaim our minds or lose them, entirely to a system designed to keep us comfortably numb. But before we dive deep, take a moment to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. What you are about to encounter may challenge your perceptions and shake the very foundations of how you see the world. Share this with those who dare to think and who still believe that truth is worth seeking. Let's begin with an uncomfortable reality. Thinking is hard, and in today's world, it is often discouraged. The modern environment no longer rewards deep contemplation. Modern society rewards speed, emotional reactions, and conformity, and this is no accident. From algorithms that feed us only what we want to hear, to educational systems that value memorization over exploration, we are being conditioned away from critical thought. Decades ago, philosopher Noam Chomsky warned about this in his analysis of media and propaganda, explaining how power structures depend on what he called the manufacturing of consent. When people are trained to consume without questioning and agree without understanding, they become easier to manage and even easier to deceive. Critical thinking, once seen as a fundamental human skill, is now treated as an inconvenience, something that slows down online debates and disrupts the instant outrage culture of the digital age. It challenges prevailing ideologies and dares to ask, but is this really true? In a world obsessed with being right, simply raising that question can feel dangerous. How did we reach this point? The problem runs deep, and one of its key drivers is the daily flood of information we face. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin notes that the average person today processes 5 times more information each day than just a few decades ago. From the moment we wake, we are bombarded with notifications, messages, breaking news, opinions, advertisements, and constant updates. Our brains were never designed to handle this relentless input. When overwhelmed, the mind begins to take shortcuts, leaning on mental habits, cognitive biases, and groupthink to navigate complexity rather than evaluating ideas critically. In such moments, it tends to look for cues from others, particularly peers, influencers, or perceived authorities. This phenomenon is known as social proof. While it's a natural survival mechanism, it can be easily manipulated. Consider how often you've come across an online post with thousands of likes and comments and immediately assumed it must be true or important. That reaction isn't reason at work, it's a psychological shortcut. This is one of the main reasons collective misinformation and poor decision-making spread so easily. It's not that people are unintelligent, but rather that they've been conditioned to follow signals instead of engaging in rational thought. Adding to this challenge is another troubling trend, the decline of deep reading. Neuroscientist Marianne Wolf explains that our brains are being rewired by digital media. We skim more, jump between tabs, and struggle to sustain focus on longer texts. The problem is that critical thinking requires sustained attention. Without it, the ability to analyze and reflect weakens significantly. If your attention span is constantly fractured, it becomes harder to truly understand anything. Ask yourself, when was the last time you read an entire article without checking your phone? When was the last time you paused, after hearing something provocative, to think rather than react? These small habits, once common, are fading away. The late Carl Sagan, one of the great minds of the 20th century, warned that we live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, yet hardly anyone knows anything about them. His concern was not only about ignorance, but about the erosion of our ability to think critically about the very systems we rely on. In a world overflowing with opinions, hot takes, and ideological battles, perhaps the greatest act of rebellion is the quiet discipline of thinking clearly. The challenge we face today is not merely technological or educational. It is also deeply emotional. Critical thinking is inherently uncomfortable because it forces us to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge, confront our egos, and endure the tension of cognitive dissonance when long-held beliefs collide with new evidence. In a culture that prizes certainty, confidence, and identity above all else, this process can feel threatening. Rather than engaging with ideas, we often retreat into ideological tribes, defend our positions reflexively, and cling to comforting slogans instead of engaging in the honest, Socratic dialogue that has fueled philosophical progress for centuries. What we are witnessing is not simply a decline in intellectual rigor, but a broader social drift toward mental complacency, a shift with devastating consequences. For when people cease to think, they cease to question, and when questioning ends, so too does the possibility of growth. When people lose the ability to think for themselves, they become vulnerable to manipulation, to propaganda, and to fear. The question we must all ask is this: who truly benefits when a population no longer engages in independent thought? Stay with me, because what follows will reveal just how deeply these forces are woven into our daily lives, and why reclaiming our capacity to think is not merely a personal choice, but a moral responsibility. To understand the roots of this collective decline, we must look beyond the surface and examine how certain systems have evolved not to nurture critical thought, but to suppress it. Take, for example, the education system. John Taylor Gatto, an award-winning teacher and outspoken critic of traditional schooling, argued that modern education is not designed to produce independent thinkers. In his words, "The truth is, schools often do little more than teach us how to follow orders." As John Taylor Gatto argued, compulsory schooling shaped during the industrial age was never truly designed to enlighten young minds, but rather to prepare them for factory life, predictable, obedient, and non-disruptive. Instead of being taught how to think, we are told what to think. From an early age, children are assessed not on the depth or originality of their ideas, but on their ability to memorize and repeat information. Conformity is rewarded, while curiosity is frequently treated as a distraction. Over time, the unspoken lesson becomes clear. Follow the rules, color inside the lines, and don't ask too many questions. This conditioning doesn't end with school. It deepens in adult life. In the workplace, in the media, even in our social circles, we learn that speaking out or questioning the consensus comes with risks, and so the habit of silent compliance endures. Holding unpopular views can come at a cost. The fear of social exclusion, of being labeled difficult or controversial, is often enough to silence even our most urgent doubts. Over time, that silence becomes complicity. As psychologist Erich Fromm observed in Escape from Freedom, many people secretly wish to surrender their freedom of thought, because true freedom carries responsibility, and responsibility can be terrifying. Thinking for yourself means you can no longer blame others for your ignorance, or take comfort in the safety of the crowd. You must face the uncertainty of truth, and for many, that burden feels too heavy to bear. So instead, we choose comfort over challenge, distraction over reflection, and simplicity over complexity. In doing so, we make ourselves far easier to control. Social media has intensified this problem to unimaginable levels. What was once a space for global connection has transformed into a battlefield of opinion wars, outrage cycles, and algorithmic manipulation. Every platform is deliberately designed to keep you scrolling, reacting, and consuming rather than thinking. You are constantly nudged toward content that reinforces your existing beliefs, encouraged to respond instantly, emotionally, and often angrily. These platforms reward engagement, not truth. They thrive on division, not understanding. In the middle of all this noise, the voice of reason is drowned out, and thoughtfulness begins to seem slow, weak, or even irrelevant. Why pause to reflect when reacting is faster and earns more likes? Philosopher Marshall McLuhan foresaw this as early as the 1960s, warning that the medium is the message, meaning that the way we receive information shapes the way we think. In today's media landscape, speed is valued over depth, outrage over nuance, and certainty over humility. Even truth itself has become distorted in the age of misinformation, where what goes viral often matters more than what is true. Ideas are no longer judged on evidence or logic, but on the number of people who agree with them, a dangerous form of the tyranny of the majority, not political, but cognitive. To move forward, we must begin by asking better questions, questions that challenge the status quo, that demand genuine answers, rather than empty slogans or statistics stripped of context. We must ask ourselves, what are we being told to believe? Who benefits from that belief? What assumptions lie beneath our certainty? And how often do we truly seek out opposing views? The goal is not to attack others, but to understand them. These questions are not easy, yet they are essential, for the cure to collective ignorance is not merely intelligence, but courage, the courage to be wrong, to learn, to admit when you don't know, and to begin the journey toward understanding anyway. Socrates, one of the earliest advocates of critical thinking, famously said that the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. This was not self-deprecation, but an invitation to remain curious, to keep questioning, and to approach the vast and mysterious world with intellectual humility. Yet today, humility is rare. Certainty is worshipped, and arrogance is mistaken for wisdom. We live in a time when everyone has an opinion, but few seek real understanding, where many are eager to speak, but reluctant to listen. The great irony is that those who truly think deeply are often the quietest voices in the room. The observant and reserved understand that wisdom grows not from noise, but from silence, contemplation, and a deep engagement with complexity. This is precisely why true critical thinkers are often outnumbered and overlooked in a culture that rewards speed and spectacle. In such an environment, the slow and deliberate process of thinking stands little chance, yet it must never be abandoned. For the moment you surrender your ability to think for yourself, you cease to be free, you become a puppet, your strings pulled by unseen forces. And let us be clear, these forces are not abstract. They are economic, political, and cultural. They are the corporations profiting from your addiction to mindless content, the politicians thriving on your emotional reactions, and the institutions relying on your unquestioning obedience. But when you reclaim your mind, you reclaim your freedom. Everything changes, you become harder to manipulate. You start to see through the illusions and stop being a passive consumer of ideas, transforming instead into an active seeker of truth. In that seemingly small act, you ignite a fire that has burned throughout history in the hearts of philosophers, scientists, revolutionaries, and truth-tellers who refuse to stop thinking. So now, the question is this: will you do the same? Stay with me, because in the next segment we will dig deeper into the psychology behind collective thinking. You'll learn why even the most intelligent minds fall into these traps, and how the brain can be deceived into believing what it wants to be true rather than what actually is. We're not finished, not even close. The most important revelation is still ahead. To truly understand the rise of collective stupidity, we must venture into the battlefield within the mind itself, despite our unshakable faith in logic. The truth is, the human brain is far more emotional than rational. We like to believe that our decisions are guided by facts, yet reality is much more complex. In his groundbreaking book, Thinking, Fast and Slow, Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman revealed that our minds operate through two distinct systems, one fast and instinctive, the other slow and deliberate. The fast system is quick, automatic, and emotionally driven. It leaps to conclusions, makes snap judgments, and conserves mental energy. The slow system, on the other hand, is thoughtful, analytical, and cautious, but it demands effort. This is where the challenge lies. In our high-speed, always-on world, most people remain locked in fast mode, with little time or willingness to slow down and think deeply. As a result, we fall back on heuristics, stereotypes, and mental shortcuts that feel right, even if they're not always accurate. Many of the ideas we hold feel certain, yet they are often wrong, making them fertile ground for mass manipulation. Politicians, marketers, and media outlets all understand how to exploit our mental shortcuts. They take complex issues and reduce them to simple, binary choices. They use emotionally charged language to bypass our reasoning and repeat carefully crafted narratives until they feel familiar enough to be accepted as truth, not because we have verified them, but because repetition breeds comfort. The real danger lies in what happens next. Once we accept something as true, our minds work to defend that belief, regardless of the evidence. This tendency, known as confirmation bias, is one of the most powerful cognitive traps we face. Think about your own beliefs. How often do you actively seek out evidence that challenges them? How often do you truly listen to opposing arguments, rather than simply preparing your rebuttal? If you're being honest, you probably don't question things as often as you think, and that's not a personal flaw. It's simply human nature. The problem arises when we're unaware of this tendency. One important idea to understand is groupthink, a psychological phenomenon where the desire for harmony or conformity within a group overrides sound judgment, often leading to irrational or even harmful decisions. History and corporate failures are filled with examples of this, where people silence their doubts for the sake of unity, choosing consensus over truth. Social psychologist Irving Janis, who coined the term, discovered that even highly intelligent and well-intentioned individuals can make catastrophic choices when they suppress dissent and avoid critical evaluation. This happens because challenging the group can feel unsafe, and going against the grain demands more than just intelligence. It requires integrity and courage. History reminds us that progress has always been driven by those who dared to think differently, figures like Galileo, Darwin, Nietzsche, and Martin Luther King, who are often rejected, ridiculed, or attacked for their ideas. Yet they persisted, speaking and thinking in defiance of the collective ignorance of their time, ultimately shaping the world we know today. But such courage carries a cost. In a society that punishes independent thought, even doubt can be an act of rebellion. To question is to risk misunderstanding, ostracism, or even hatred. Still, the reward is profound clarity, self-respect, and the quiet strength it comes from. Knowing your beliefs are truly your own, not merely programmed into you. And if we bring this closer to home, it raises a pressing question. Why do so many of us today feel lost, anxious, or unfulfilled? Even in an age where we have more access to information and technology than any generation before us, the real challenge lies not in what we possess, but in what we've lost. One of the greatest losses is the habit of inner dialogue, the ability to sit with a question, explore it deeply, and allow truth to emerge through reflection. We've increasingly outsourced our thinking to machines, media, and public opinion, forgetting that no algorithm can tell us what is true for us. No trending topic can replace our inner voice, and no mass movement can substitute for the quiet certainty of a well-examined belief. The first step toward reclaiming this capacity is cultivating awareness of our mental habits, the sources we consume, and the moments when we are genuinely thinking versus simply reacting. A powerful tool in this process is metacognition, thinking about our thinking. By asking ourselves questions such as, what's influencing my opinion right now? Am I open to being wrong? Am I engaging with this idea fully? We begin to reconnect with the clarity and depth that only self-reflection can bring. Rather than absorbing information passively, one powerful approach is the deliberate practice of dialectical thinking, the ability to hold two opposing ideas in tension and explore them fully. This is more than intellectual flexibility. It is a form of mental strength that moves us beyond binaries, beyond the us versus them mindset, and into the space where genuine understanding can take root. As the philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti observed, to understand the immeasurable, the mind must be extraordinarily quiet, still. That rare stillness so elusive in our age is where the seeds of wisdom grow. Yet critical thinking is not a skill one acquires overnight. It is a discipline. It demands reading beyond headlines, engaging with books, full arguments, and nuanced perspectives. It also requires listening to voices we may not agree with, allowing our own ideas to be tested and refined. True wisdom requires humility, especially toward those you don't understand, and the willingness to accept uncertainty as part of the journey. Above all, it demands rejecting intellectual laziness. If something sounds too good to be true, it likely is. If everyone around you accepts an idea without question, that's your signal to pause. Not to rebel for the sake of rebellion, but to investigate with honesty. In an age when ignorance is loud and confidence is too often mistaken for competence, deep thinking is more than a personal virtue. It is a public service. The future of any society rests not on the volume of its opinions, but on the quality of its thought. And the most powerful change rarely begins with mass movements. It begins with a single individual who chooses to think clearly in a world that does not. In the final stage of this journey, we will uncover the most important truth of all the real reason critical thinking is vanishing, and how you can not only resist this decline, but also become a guiding light for others. What follows may transform the way you see your own mind, your relationships, and your role in shaping the world. At the core of this crisis, beneath the digital noise, failing institutions, and cultural polarization, lies something far more insidious. Critical thinking is not disappearing because people are incapable of it, but because they fear what it might expose. To think critically is to risk unsettling the very foundations of our psychological safety, our identity, our beliefs, our sense of belonging. And for many, these are too sacred to challenge. We now live in an age where identity itself has become untouchable, and where opinions have become the very fabric of self-definition. In today's world, affiliations and ideologies have become so intertwined with personal identity that challenging an idea is often mistaken for a personal attack. Yet this is the very illusion that destroys true thought, the belief that we are our ideas. You are not your political party, your religion, or your social group. You are a human being with the capacity to evolve, to learn, and to change. That evolution begins the moment you separate your worth from your current beliefs. The deepest truth is that critical thinking is more than an intellectual skill. It is a spiritual act. It is the choice to honor truth over comfort, growth over certainty, and freedom over approval. It is the quiet resolve to live with your eyes open, even when the light burns. For once you begin to think critically, you start to see the structures around you, the systems of influence and manipulation that shape the world you live in. The algorithms of control and the masks people wear can be overwhelming, sometimes even painful, but they are real. And reality, no matter how uncomfortable, is the only foundation upon which true freedom can be built. As Carl Jung once observed, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Yet confronting our inner world, our unconscious motives, inherited beliefs, and cognitive traps is the very essence of thinking. Critical thinking is not merely about questioning the world around us. It is also about questioning ourselves. It's about asking, why do I believe what I believe? Where did this idea come from? Which parts of me are afraid to let it go? When these questions are asked with honesty, a new world begins to open, not just a world of knowledge, but a world of wisdom. Wisdom is what our society is starving for. In a culture addicted to quick answers, wisdom calls us to ask deeper questions. In a system built on noise, it offers the gift of silence. In an era of mass conformity, it dares to be free. This is your invitation, not simply to think, but to awaken. To stop living as a mere product of your environment, and to start becoming the architect of your own mind. No school, no system, no social media platform will do this for you. The responsibility is yours alone. And when you rise to it, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see with clarity and to feel what it means to live in alignment with truth. Not borrowed truth, not popular truth, but your own hard-earned truth. You start to recognize the subtle ways manipulation is used against you, to discern the difference between information and propaganda, between education and indoctrination. Between connection and performance lies the real turning point, when you begin to lead not with noise or ego, but with depth. You become a light in a dark room, a voice of calm in a storm of outrage, a grounded thinker in a world of reactionaries. This is what the world needs now, more than ever, not louder voices or sharper arguments, but deeper minds. Minds willing to sit with complexity, to admit, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn. Minds no longer driven to win debates, but to understand reality. If you want to change the world, begin by changing the way you think, not because it's easy or popular, but because it's right. The rise of collective stupidity is not the cause of our crisis. It is the symptom, a symptom of fear, of fatigue, and of a world too distracted to look inward.